What's going on, guys? XSR Detroit here with another video for you. Today I'm going to be replacing the front spring and shock on my Honda CRF300L. I've got some parts from KTECH. If you saw my dirt review for the Honda CRF, I complained a lot about the soft suspension. I didn't want to go into another season with the suspension because it felt pretty sketchy sometimes, and I just want better performance out of it. So I'm going to show you guys how to do this complete install. We're going to replace the spring, we're going to replace the shock, and hopefully it addresses the issues I had with the Honda CRF300L's stock suspension. The first thing I want to do is loosen these fork caps. As you can see, my handlebar setup is pretty crowded with the hand guards and the GoPro mount and the charger. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna take the handlebars loose and just set them on the tank for a sec, crack these top caps loose, and then put the handlebars back on. You might not have to do this. You might be able to fit like an adjustable wrench in here. It really just depends on your setup, but we're gonna have to torque it later. So I'm just gonna remove the handlebars for now, put them back on, and then when I need to torque them, we'll take the handlebars back off. I'm not gonna pull off all the controls or everything. I'm just gonna take everything loose and set it on the tank for a sec, loosen them, and put the handlebars right back on. So now that I've got my handlebars just kind of thrown over the bike, we're going to loosen up these top caps. These are a 30mm size. Basically, I'm gonna loosen them. I'm not gonna remove them. We're just loosening them while they're on the bike, so it's gonna be a lot easier. We'll take them off completely later when we have the forks off. All right, those are ready to go. I'm gonna go ahead and put the handlebars back on. Now that I have the top caps loose, I'm going to put my bike on the lift so we can get that front wheel off. The first thing I'm going to remove are these axle pinch bolts. They're 10mm. I already had the wheel off before I forgot to mention this, but my bike is a non-ABS model. So if you have ABS, you're gonna have a wheel sensor, so make sure you disconnect that stuff before you take off the wheel. I don't have to worry about that, but I didn't want to leave you guys hanging, and I don't want to see anybody damage a sensor or anything, so make sure you take a look at the bike. If you have a non-ABS, you're good to go, but I did want to mention this. I didn't think about it until after I took off the front wheel, so I just wanted to put this in here before we move forward. Next up is the front axle. It is a 14mm Allen socket. Oh yeah. I'm gonna hold the top of the wheel to keep it even as I pull the axle. Just roll that front wheel out. Usually if I have something like spacers or dust covers on the axle, I like to just put them back on how they were, so when I put the axle back in, I pretty much know where everything's going. I mean, I think these are the same part, but it's just a good habit to get into. On the clutch side fork of the bike, we've got our brake line. We've got two 8mm fasteners on the cover. We're gonna go ahead and remove that. Before I start removing the caliper, I want to show you guys this zip tie daisy chain that I put together. I'm gonna use this to hold the caliper up. I don't want the caliper to dangle. You can damage these soft brake lines by doing that, so I'm gonna just kind of like rig it up to the frame so it's out of the way and not getting damaged while we've got the forks off. So we've got two bolts mounting the caliper to the forks. These are 12mm. I put a zip tie through both mounting holes on the caliper. It's not the most elegant solution, but hey, at least we don't have to worry about messing up our brake line, right? Before I pull this fork, I'm just taking note of the height in the triple tree. I'm gonna take a couple pictures for reference, so when I put it back together, I make sure that they're at the correct height. But this is something you wanna do before you pull your forks. So we've got 4 pinch bolts to take out before we remove the fork. I'm gonna start with the bottom ones. These look like they're 10 mil. They are 10 mil. All right, so they're 10 millimeter. We'll start with the bottom and work our way up to the top. And as a bonus, if you still have your reflectors on your bike like I do, you can toss these into the trash. We've got our top pinch bolts to remove. I'm gonna start by cracking the bottom one loose, then the top, and just gently loosening them up while I'm holding the fork. Eventually the fork will slide out, so make sure you're not just like loosening these and expecting the fork to stay. So make sure you have a hand on the fork. And here we have our fork. It's up to you if you want to remove the fork covers or not. I think I'm just going to pop them off real quick just so they're kind of not in the way, but you don't have to do it if you don't want to. I decided to start with the brake side fork. What we're going to do is just take this top loose. And we're gently going to work the fork down. So I've got my fork completely compressed. I want to show you guys something here. This right here, might be a little difficult to see, is a retaining clip, okay? So we need to remove this, and I'm gonna attempt to do it with this little screwdriver here, this flathead. We need to remove this so we can remove the guts of the fork. This was a complete pain in the ass. I spent like an hour trying to compress and get this clip out. So I'm gonna show you what worked for me. I got this tip from a Facebook group. I was like at the point where like I need to ask for some help. But I took a ratchet strap and just compressed it down, and that way I could move the clip internally. And I ended up using a pick, and once I picked it out of the seat, I just grabbed it with some small needle nose pliers. I didn't film this because I like I said, I'd been doing this for like an hour, so I wasn't sure when I was gonna get it, but I did manage to get the clip out. Pushing down on this, if you can push down on this and get that clip, man, more power to you. I couldn't, so I did use this ratchet strap. It worked out. So for now, I'm just gonna remove this ratchet strap and we will pull out the suspension. I'm going to dump the old oil in the fork out. I took the top portion of the suspension. It just pops off. Might be a little stiff, but it will come off. I've got the spring in here. I didn't want to pull it out. We got our stock spring there. I wanted to show you guys the difference between the springs. On the bottom here we have the KTECH, up top we have the stock, so we do get a little bit more spring for compression, which is cool, but at this point we are ready to fill the fork with fluid. The fork oil that I'm going with is the Honda OE 10 weight oil. I didn't want to get too crazy with fork oil. I'm not doing like a high performance application, so we're just going to stick with the manufacturer stuff. So I've got my fork completely compressed, there's nothing inside of it, and the amount of air gap we need is about 7.2 inches. So I'm gonna start adding some fluid, and we're measuring from the top of the outer fork. And once we have that, we can start reassembling it. All right, cool. Go ahead and grab your replacement spring and insert it into the fork. Now that I have the spring installed, we're going to install the rest of the rod. So we managed to get the retaining ring back in. This feels like a two-person job to me. I don't know if I would attempt to do this solo. Honda does have a specialty tool for putting that ring in its place. I'm sure that would work a lot better than just manhandling it, but if you've got a buddy, you just ask him to help you. And yeah, it's what a pain in the ass. And I'm sure because of the KTECH's upgraded spring, there's a bit more spring to compress. Getting this on was this whole process has been a bit of a pain in the ass, honestly. But what we're going to do now is we're going to slowly move the outer tube up and fasten it on, and I'm going to let it sit for a little bit. You want to make sure you don't have any air in your fork too, so when you're coming up, make sure you're coming up very slowly, like just don't grab it. But yeah, we're going to slowly move this up. All right, so like I said earlier in the video, this is a 30 millimeter. I did put a bit of fork oil on the O-rings up here because I didn't replace them. My bike only has 1,700 miles, so I'm really not worried about these going bad at this point, but I did add a bit of fork oil just to lubricate them a little bit since we got it all taken apart. I'm not going to worry about applying torque now. I'm going to do it later, similar to how I broke it loose when it was on the bike. So for now, we're not going to worry about torque, but we'll get to that eventually. So I set aside the brake side fork. I've got it up against the wall vertically so that I can adjust. We're going to move on to the clutch side of the bike. Basically what I'm going to do is just remove it. The only thing we're doing on this fork is changing fluid. So if you've got like a low mileage CRF, like mine has 1,700 miles, which isn't a lot, you don't necessarily have to change the fluid. We're just pulling the fluid out and replacing it with the same amount. We're not doing anything different. So if you want to skip this, it's up to you. I am going to swap the fluid on this, but it's not something you necessarily have to do. But like the other side, we've got 4 pinch bolts. These are 10 millimeter, and we are going to remove them starting with the bottom ones. Holy fuck! Holy fuck!
I mean, it's holding torque on.
Yeah, but that, like, the torque spec for that is like 20 newts. Yeah, I thought I was going to shear that bolt off. I was like, hang on a sec, this should not be this fucking tight. We have this perch for the brake line that we have to remove. It's a 8 millimeter fastener. Same as the other side, you want to make sure you take a look and maybe take a picture for reference for the height of the forks in the triple trees. I'm going to loosen the bottom and then loosen the top. Make sure you have a hand on the fork because it will definitely slide out on you. For the clutch side fork, we're just going to take the top loose, get that old fluid out there and refill it. Got my fork here, we're completely compressed, just like the other side. We're just adding fluid with this. We're looking for an air gap of around 2 inches. So we're measuring from the top, you know, the outer fork here. So we're just gonna add some fluid and that's it for this one. We're just gonna slowly bring that fork back up. Get a couple threads in, tighten it up, and we're gonna let that sit for 10 minutes or so. At this point, I'm ready to put the forks back into the triple trees. What I've done is I've got the 2 bolts on the top. They're fastened in a little bit. That way, when I put the fork in, I can still slide the fork in and I'll be able to tighten it. I'm not gonna hit these with torque just yet until we install the lower ones. I want to show you guys these strap rings I picked up. I've got a truck on order. I'm hoping it shows up soon so I can use it for the summer, but I wanted to add some mounting points for toe straps and stuff on my motorcycle. So these are going to go on the lower portion of the triple tree. I figured I'd put these on now because I already got everything taken apart. Obviously this isn't part of the suspension upgrade, but I thought they're kind of cool, you know. They're cheap. I think they have like a 2,000 pound breakaway specification, so they should be pretty legit. Before you apply any torque to these fasteners, you want to make sure that the fork is set at the correct height. Mine's good to go. So we've got these 4 pinch fasteners. These are all 29 Newton meters. Now that I've got the pinch bolts torqued, I'm just going to put this perch for the brake line back on. Same as the clutch side, we're going to pop in the brake side fork. The 4 pinch bolts have the same torque value as the other side at 29 Newton meters. Now that I've got my forks all torqued up, we're going to go ahead and install the front wheel. The axle size is 14mm Allen. The torque for the axle is 69 Newton meters. Nice. We've got 2 10mm pinch bolts for the axle. The torque for these 2 bolts is 22 Newton meters. Let's get this front caliper back on the bike. I'm just gonna go ahead and cut my zip ties. Get that out of there. And back onto the rotor. And we've got our 2 12mm fasteners. I'm gonna go ahead and pop these 2 8mm fasteners to fasten the brake line to the fork cover. At this point, I'm going to take the bike off the lift and remove my handlebars so I can tighten the fork caps. We've got our fork caps here. They are 30mm with a torque of 35 Newton meters. Last step is to put the handlebars back on and we are done with the front suspension. That's it for the front suspension. Let's move on to the rear. On the clutch side of the bike, we're looking at the top shock nut. There's a bolt going through it on the other side, of course, but it's a 17mm, and what I did is I just broke it loose a little bit. I'm gonna go on the other side with the 14 and loosen it a little more. We're not removing the bolt at this point. It's just easier to do this when the bike is on the ground, because after this, we're gonna put the bike back on the lift and start going at the bottom fasteners. All right, that's pretty loose. I've got my bike back on the lift. I've got the rear wheel in the air, and the first thing I'm gonna loosen up is this nut on the link for the suspension. So on the other side of your link, you're gonna have a 14mm bolt. So keep your wrench on the 17mm nut and your socket wrench on the 14 and start removing it. We got our nut. I'm gonna support the rear tire and let that drop. Now that we've got our link removed, we've got the lower nut and bolt combo for the shock. Now the nut is 17mm and the bolt is a 14mm. same as pretty much everything on the rear suspension. So we're gonna remove the rear suspension bolt, and then we'll go back up top, take that bolt out, and swap the shock. Oh yeah. If you lift the rear wheel and subframe, or swing arm, sorry, it's a lot easier to remove the shock bolt. So now we just have to grab the top bolt. So from the bottom of the bike, I'm holding up the shock. I'm gonna try and fish the fastener out. All right, got our fastener. And our shock is completely loose now. So we've got the stock shock here and the new KTECH shock here. We've got adjustment up top, we've got adjustment back down here on the bottom. I'm really hoping that this rear shock kind of addresses the issues I had with the CRF, but I'm never gonna find out if I don't pop it on the bike, so let's get this shock on. Before I install the shock, I'm going to apply a bit of grease to each of the fasteners for the shock. Mine were completely dry, so they need it, and I've got it apart anyway, so this is a great time to do it. I'm basically gonna do everything I did in reverse, so I'm gonna lift the swing arm and the tire up and get the shock in there. We'll start with the top bolt. We'll just get the nut on and run it down, but we won't apply torque just yet. And then we'll start working on the bottom. I've got the collar with the Allen head facing me, so if I need to make adjustments, I can access this Allen key. This locks the adjustment portion of the shock down, so I want to make sure it's somewhere where I can actually get it. So take a look at your shock before you pop it in, but let's get this shock installed. On the other side of the bike, we've got our fastener. I'm gonna pop that on a socket with an extension just so it's a little easier to work in there. And we will line up the top bolt. All right, looking good. Grab our washer and 17 mil nut. Ah, son of a bitch. So I've got my nut on the top front shock bolt. I'm gonna work down towards the bottom and start putting that back together, and then we'll do the torque after we have the bottom bolt through. I'm gonna lift the rear wheel a little. So I'm using my leg to support the rear wheel. This would probably be easier if you had a partner, but honestly, it's not that big a deal. It's not that heavy. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put my fastener through, get my nut going. A lot of nut talk in this episode, I guess. And we're just gonna run that down, and we're gonna have to apply torque while the link is disconnected, and we'll do the link last. So I'm gonna tighten up this rear bolt first. We'll tighten up the top, we'll do the link, and we're all set. Let's tighten this up. We're gonna torque this lower shock bolt to 44 Newton meters. Moving up to the top shock bolt, I'm just going to tighten it up and apply some torque, and we can move on to the swing arm link. The torque for the top bolt is the same as the bottom. It's 44 Newton meters. Just gonna go ahead and lift that wheel, line up the link. Perfect. Get that nut on there and tighten it up. Big surprise, the torque for this fastener is 44 Newton meters. Before I swapped the suspension, I did like a rocking test. So I basically loaded up the front brake and just you know, kept rocking the bike back and forth. You know, it's a squishy bike with the stock suspension. So now that we have the aftermarket KTECH suspension, let's take a seat on the bike and see how it feels. Oh, definitely taller, definitely taller. Yeah, that is significantly stiffer. Very nice. Well, I'm gonna go take this for a quick test ride, feel everything out, and I think we're gonna wrap it up. So, just got back from the test drive, and wow, this is definitely stiffer than the stock suspension. The bike sits a bit taller, so if you're a shorter rider, that might be something you want to think about. At 5'8" with the stock suspension, I would kick my leg over pretty decently, and it wasn't an issue. With this suspension, I am kind of tiptoeing a little bit, which I don't think is a problem. You know, it's a dirt bike or a dual sport, so I want as much suspension travel as I can get, but I do plan on doing a full review on the suspension in the future. I want to spend some real time with it. I don't want to just take it out for a test drive on the street and go, oh, it's so much better. It feels better, but I really want to spend time with it, get it in the dirt, ride it on the street, and get the full experience of the suspension before I start saying, yes, go out and buy it. I will say, I did notice that when I was like applying the front brake, the bike wasn't diving like it used to. The bike overall feels so much more solid than it did before. I would say that you get a lot more feedback through the suspension, and I mean that in a good way because the stock suspension on the CRF300L is so soft and vague. When I was riding around, just around town, just for a few, I was just like, man, this is how the bike should have came from the factory. It should feel stiffer, and it should give you more feedback, you know, on the terrain that you're riding on. So I can't wait to get this bike into some dirt. The only thing I have planned as far as modifications coming up are tires, because my stock tires are actually kind of cooked. They're more cooked than I thought they were, so they gotta go. But I'm still kind of shopping around. I'm not sure what to buy because I'm looking for stuff that's decent in the sand, and as far as dual sport tires go, that is kind of a big ask. So we're going to see what happens, but I will get some new tires on here soon. But overall, I cannot wait to get this bike in the dirt now. I can't wait to see how different it feels. I am super excited. The install overall is not that bad. The hardest part is getting that retaining pin out of the fork with the spring in it. That was a pain in the ass, but if you have a buddy that can help you compress it, it's going to be a lot simpler, and I had better luck with a pick than I did a small screwdriver, so that's something to keep in mind. Big shout out to my buddy Tim for coming over and giving me a hand on super short notice. Really appreciate that. I think this, at least for the front suspension, it's a two-person job. For the rear suspension, it's not that big a deal. If you have a buddy that can hold the tire up for you, that's cool, but personally, I don't think the rear tire and swing arm are that heavy, so I just set it on my shin and I didn't have any problems. So, but it's up to you. But yeah, guys, if you found this video informative, please like it. My channel isn't monetized. I don't make any money doing these videos. I just do it because I like shooting video and I love motorcycles, and I hope that when people watch my content, they can learn something. If you're looking for CRF content, I've got quite a bit, so consider subscribing. And as always, ride fast, ride naked, wear your helmet, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.